Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the countdown to the U.S. presidential election. We're on November 5 today. We had hopes that we might know the result of this election, but as a lot of us have sort of anticipated, there could easily be a delay in the counting, in which this is what we are seeing. Currently, Biden is in the lead. There are 3 states to be uncalled. Arizona was just recently called by the Associated Press, putting Joe Biden at 264 electoral votes and Donald Trump at 214. And then the Senate is very interesting. We have that at a 48-48 balance right now. And of course, the 3 remaining states that have not been counted are Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. So it's Biden is in the lead in all of these 3 states, but it's very narrow, and it really has they're finding that there are trends versus the mail-in ballot versus people who came in to vote in person on that day. And so we don't know where it's going. It's so close. It looks like Biden, things are trending Biden, but we don't know. And of course, we know that the president has proclaimed victory and has announced that all mail-in votes are fraudulent. And so we have some lawsuits going on in some different states. We will definitely have recounts. We can just, yeah, that's going to happen. But anyway, I want to bring everyone in for a minute and just, what do you guys think?
It's a wild ride. Alaska is also uncalled at the moment.
And North Carolina too, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question any longer, honestly. It's going exactly when Joe Biden came out the other day after Donald Trump got hysterical, and Joe was very calm. He said, "We've won this. You don't understand, because Joe's been in politics for 40 years. Donald Trump has never been in it. So he knew not only that he was going to win because of the way the voting was coming in." So anyway.
I think what was really interesting as we see how this is unfolding is that the polls were so off. All of the polling seems to have been inaccurate, and also nobody even, I think that we did as a group predicted or realized that there was going to be a tremendous turnout, but I don't think that anybody had said that it would be the largest popular vote in history. So it's interesting that, there's a problem with the polling, which, hopefully going forward, somehow they're going to resolve it. Because what has happened is nothing like what the polls said would happen.
Well, that's why they should hire astrologers to be pollers.
Yeah, do you suppose it had anything to do with the Uranus in his chart? He's changed a lot of things. Trump has.
Yeah, Trump did what he was supposed to do. Honestly, yep. I think we all understand that now.
Yeah, catalyst.
He was the, perhaps the piece of sand that created the pearl.
Grit.
Or the plutonium. Oh, sorry, Michaela, go for it.
Oh, I said the grit. Yeah, I'm agreeing,
Yeah.
In the pearl.
I was just going to reference, he is the Pluto catalyst. To evolve, sometimes we need to face things that are deep, deep down and really come to terms with it. So,
he's the homeopathic remedy for the American shadow.
Yes. Anyhow, go for it, Chad.
Oh, I was just going to say that I feel like, I said I thought it was going to be a landslide, like the polls were saying. And I think it's actually in a certain way healthy that it wasn't a landslide. And I know that's kind of maybe hard to understand immediately, but
no, I get it.
There's a way in which, I feel like Trump, he really is a wounded child, and he's suffering, and he's he's led people down delusional paths, and we all are in this together. Like there's, and the fact that there wasn't like a real repudiation of Trumpism means that there's a lot of people who actually identify with a lot of the things he's saying, irrespective of his sociopathy, you know? And like, there's something really important about that factor that we have to embrace and address and bring into the light and negotiate as in a healthiest way as possible, because, you know, the other side is he leads us into more division and potentially into violence. And so I think it's a real opportunity for us to see the truth and hold each other to account. And I think this actually could be our finest hour too. Like what happened in Georgia, like if you think about the oppression that's been overcome, the suppression, the voter suppression, and the amount of women who came out to vote, whereas in 2016 they didn't. This is a real positive revolutionary symbols in my mind. So I'll leave it there.
I think the question that I've asked and that a lot of people are asking is, how is it that so many people could support him? You know, almost 70 million people have voted for him. And I see two vectors here. Number one, I think that there's a large majority of GOP who don't necessarily love Donald Trump, but they're not going to vote for a Democrat. And then I think that there's also a large segment of the population that's just angry and unhappy with the way their lives are, and they just want to mix it up. So, you know, this is kind of what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and those people are less likely to be polled. Like as far as the polls being inaccurate, I mean, you got to figure that the polls are reaching people who are more engaged in society. They're not reaching the marginalized people in the same way. And those are the people who came out and voted for him, I think.
Right.
All things being equal, the truth of the matter is that this is a landslide based on the way America is split. 4 or 5 million people make a difference. That's the most we can hope for at this stage of our society. So while it isn't the great blue wave many of us had hoped or anticipated, it's the closest thing to a landslide we're going to get right now. So,
and I appreciate what Chad said about that. You know, maybe it's better that it wasn't a complete landslide, because it really does cause us to really embrace what is reality, what is America. I think a lot of people are silent about their political views, but they feel strongly about them, and that's a lot of what we are being shown through this. So anyhow, it will be interesting. So I'd love to get into the talks. I'm introducing you in reverse. I should have done this before the chat, but today we have Mitch Lewis, Marty Dixon, Sue Hilliard. Who did I don't know what I put down there.
Daniel Fiverson.
Oh, that I put Davy, and I was like, I'm so sorry, that was bad. Daniel Fiverson, Michaela Villiers-Kendall, and Chad Alexander Harris. So first we're going to be speaking with Mitch Lewis. Welcome, Mitch.
well, thank you, Stacie. Nice to be back. Yeah, it's almost over, guys. We get that. I don't think there's any doubt anymore. Personally, I never had any doubt. For what it's worth, we've all made our predictions, and it's when we all want to blow our horns when we're right about it. But I've been saying for about a year that Biden was the one. Even before he got the nomination, he was doing a series of lectures up and down the East Coast. And I was looking at Bernie's chart and Elizabeth Warren's chart and Buttigieg and all the rest of them. And the only one that made any sense to me was Joe Biden. Because when I did, and I think last time I was on, I used some PowerPoints, which I'm not going to bother with today. And I showed America's chart and how Donald Trump's chart fits on America's chart. Donald Trump was born under a full moon eclipse with Uranus conjunct the sun. And America has a Mars-Neptune square in its chart, if you use the so-called Sibley chart, which is one that I like to use. And that's the place that America is most fearful and most confused and most misdirected. And Donald Trump's eclipse sits right on top of the Mars, squaring the Neptune. So how did Donald Trump get elected? Through fear, through misunderstanding, through misdirection. And that's how he pretty much governed for 4 years. And then I took a look at Joe Biden's chart. Joe Biden's Jupiter sits right on top of America's Mercury. Look at the difference. Jupiter saying, be optimistic. Let's try and pull it together. Let's be bigger than Jupiter, bigger than we have. While Donald Trump is doing the opposite, he's pulling us apart. So when I took a look at the two of those, and then I did everybody else's charts too, I came to the conclusion that Joe was the one who had the best shot, not only of winning the nomination, but of doing it. And once he got the nomination, I had very little doubt that he would win, all things being equal. We're going to be right sometimes, we're going to be wrong in our predictions. I don't care. As my brother likes to say, if you continue to predict, they'll continue to listen to you, even if you're wrong. So, but we are at a place, we're all astrologers, so we understand that, among other things, America's going through its Pluto return. For those who are listening who don't understand that, each planet has a return. The sun comes every year, the moon every month. They all have their orbit around the sun. And Pluto takes about 240 years to make its return. So we're going through this rather intense aspect. And what Pluto rules in the body, I do a lot of medical astrology, Pluto rules all the parts of the body that remove waste. The urethra, the colon, the sweat glands, the tear ducts, any way that we remove waste from the body, that's Pluto's domain. And if you're doing horary charts, for example, and you lost your wedding ring and Pluto's right on the ascendant, look in the bathroom near the toilet, look in the garbage disposal, you may find it. So what's happening is America is releasing the inner infection that has been with us always. The 1619 Project, racism. We were born under racism, under slavery. Even Ben Franklin had slaves. Washington did. Martha Washington, after George died, refused to free her slaves, even though it was in George's will. So it's part of our heritage and something that we need to finally, I hope, come to terms with. And the fact that we are going through this election and the Pluto return at the same time that civil and social and racial unrest has grown to the point that it has grown to, that we haven't really seen this kind of upheaval since the late 60s, early 70s. It's all of a piece. And so Donald Trump isn't the problem. We know that. He's just the poster boy. The problem is much deeper than that. And while I don't want it to be Democrat versus Republican or right versus left or anything else, because what does that mean? Today, Richard Nixon would be left of center. So we use these terms and they change from generation to generation. But the Republican Party has embraced a certain kind of perspective that if they're smart, and there are many Republicans who are quite smart people, they're recognizing that this can't continue. Now, the second people keep saying Donald Trump is going to be around, it doesn't matter if he loses, nonsense. When Donald Trump loses, I don't know if you guys have seen this, Madame Trousseau, I think her name is, who has the Wax Museum in London. She put a new exhibit up, or I don't think it's a her anymore, but the people put a new exhibit up where they have a dumpster, a literal dumpster that they moved in and put Donald Trump in the dumpster. I think it's hilarious. I think it really shows the point. And, oh yeah, I'm all for him. Absolutely, I'm all for him. Oh, he lost? Well, you know what? Let's find somebody else to back. And I don't think Donald Trump is going to stick around. I think he'll be around for a while. He'll go on the radio shows and he'll do his nonsense and he'll scream and carry on. But I think his time's gone. I think it's done. And what the Republican Party morphs into, that's what we have to wait to see. Now, you know, even George Washington, to bring him back up again, in his second, I think it was his second inaugural speech, he warned against the two-party system. He said, all you're going to have is this tug of war back and forth, back and forth. And occasionally you'll find common ground, but it's going to be a swing back and forth. Well, that's what America is, because America is a centrist country. We pull a little to the left, we pull it back. A little to the right too much, we pull it back into the middle. And that's what happens. In 1968, after the sex, drugs, and rock and roll of the 60s and the rest of it, even before Woodstock, we elected Richard Milhous Nixon. Of course, he got the election because of the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, I believe. I think Bobby would have won the presidency, but in any case, history does what it's supposed to do. And while we think that we all know, and people think they're smart, whether they're the poll people or the pundits or the political writers for the Times or the Washington Post or even Fox News, we only know from our perspective. And again, from the point of view of the Pluto return, which hasn't even really begun. Now, we feel the outer planets a good year, sometimes 2 years before we're conscious of in our collective consciousness or our individual consciousness. And the Pluto return doesn't complete by sidereal astrology until 2023. And so we have a couple of years yet to go through the process of trying to decide what America wants to be when it grows up. We are still a very young nation. We have a potential that's astronomical or astrological, if you will. I'm in the process of getting something together for the financial astrology, which I do a lot of because I worked in the mercantile exchange for about 12 years. And I'm often asked to lecture about the stock markets and the economy. And I go back and I look at history and I look at the different stock market crashes and what led to each of them. And America's economy, as you know, right now is in awful shape. We are not in a recession. What we are is teetering on the bridge of, or the brink of a depression. Will it slip in? Well, that has a lot to do with who governs. And if we, you know, we kept hoping, of course, if the Democrats controlled the Senate, well, there would be a lot more stimulus and there would be, in my opinion, a huge infrastructure bill, which probably will not take place right now. We need an FDR in the White House or the equivalent in order to change the direction we're in. And it's not going to happen overnight. We have very short attention spans. But the stock market, for example, doesn't. The stock market has a very long memory. For example, in 1905, there was a crash. 1907 actually is when the crash actually happened, but it started in 05 and it deteriorated. And most people are not aware of that. And the markets went down to a point. And at that point, they turned around and they went up. And then in 1929, we had a crash. And that crash was about this big. In 1931, there was a crash that was this big. And the markets went right back down to where they had been in 1905. And it's called support. And it held that support and then turned around and went back up again. Now, you and I, we think about our stocks, we think about the 401k, or maybe if you're trading a little bit, you're thinking about in terms of days or weeks or months. Well, but the markets think in terms of decades. And sometimes the markets will go right back down to where they were at a different time in history, because the markets do not trade on reality, they trade on psychology. And the psychology of the collective is such that, well, again, the collective has a better memory than the individual. And so what we're leading into here, I have been predicting for some time that we were going to see a severe market crash that, well, I've been saying this for almost 2 years, that would come in two waves. First one would be in 2020, and it would be a sharp decline. I didn't know it would be as sharp as it was, but of course it turned around. And there's what they call a V recovery. The markets go down, they go right back up again. But what we are experiencing here is what they call a K recovery. That's where the rich go up and the poor and the middle class go down. It creates a K. That's the kind of recovery that we're in right now. And I said that the second part of the crash would take place probably in around February, late January, February of 2021, interestingly enough, right after the inauguration. And as is attributed to Voltaire, one of my favorite sayings, God is a comedian playing to an audience too afraid to laugh. Well, you get a new president in there, and what happens? They go into the White House and they start counting the silverware, and they realize, oh my God, this is what our economy is really in. This is the kind of shape we're in. Well, that limits the ability to make certain changes. Of course, we deal with money in our society in what they call fiat. That means IOUs. There's no gold backing it. There's no nothing backing it. We promise to pay you whatever your money says. So they just print more and more and more and more money. And they do it electronically. They don't actually print the bills. They don't put them out when they need them. So I think that we are heading into a time of serious downward trend. What that will mean in the midterm elections, the all-important midterm elections, when the Democrats hope that they will regain control of Congress, we'll have to see. Because if the markets go down and the economy is very weak and Biden can't do what we hope he will do because Mitch McConnell and the Republicans prevent him from doing it, that may not look very good for the Democrats in the midterm elections, and we could lose the House. If, on the other hand, Joe Biden is capable of pulling this together and doing the kind of compromising that he is capable of doing, he's a very smart, very, in my opinion, gentle and heartfelt man. But of course, you know the old saying, how do you know a politician's lying? His lips are moving. So all politicians do what they have to do, and they think about their power. And Joe Biden is going into this with his eyes open and with some very, very smart people behind him, economists and lawyers and all the rest of it. And let's see what he's capable of pulling out. There's very little doubt that he's won this election, and he's won it by a big enough majority, as I said earlier to Chad, that when we were chatting before we came on, it's the closest thing to a big wave that we can expect right now with the split in this country. And that's how I'm looking at this. I think this is a very, very big step in the right direction. I think it would be foolish to think that we got everything that we wanted or that the world is suddenly going to change. It's not. It's Pluto. It takes a long, long time for a Pluto aspect to complete. My sun is 22.5 degrees Cancer. I have had Pluto and Saturn, with Saturn this past year, but Pluto opposing my sun for the last 2.5 years. If you want to talk sometime, I'll tell you what that aspect was like. It forced me to clean out a lot of things, change some of the issues about my own personality, looking into the future in ways that I didn't think I would, and at the same time has given me an opportunity for power and for exposure to the world that I had not expected. So it's been a very positive aspect. I'm redoing my apartment completely, getting a second desk in here because I don't have enough room for my astrology and my novels and the rest of this stuff on my desk. I got another desk. I got all kinds of stuff. I'm redoing everything. I'm just, cleaning out. That's what Pluto wants us to do. So we have to clean out in our collective in order to get the infection that is in there. Call it racism or xenophobia or financial, inequality. It's all of a piece. It's all the same. Pluto will make us do that. It's going to take several more years. We will come through it. We're a very strong country. We have a tremendous amount of resources, and we can do what we need to do. We have to have patience. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it's the opposite, 1 step forward and 2 steps back. In any case, I'm very optimistic about this. I'm very happy about the results. I do wish they leaned a little bit more to the blue side, but at least Donald Trump is history. There's one more thing and then I'm going to go. There used to be a restaurant in New York called the Stage Deli, and they would name the sandwiches after famous people. There was a Mel Brooks and there was, everybody. And I always said if they were still open, I would go in there and order the Donald Trump on toast. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much. This was great fun. And I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to say. God bless America. Let's
Yeah.
just hope for the best.
Yes. Thank you, Mitchell. I'm curious about, you emphasize the Pluto return quite a bit, I've
Right.
noticed. And how do you interpret the Pluto-Saturn conjunction that occurred in January of 2020 relative to how close it is to its return?
Well, several things, Stacie. For one thing, because I did commodities for so many years, I learned more about astrology by being on the commodities floor than I did by the thousands of readings that I've done for people. I got a chance to see astrology work on a massive scale. Oh, cotton went down. Well, look, Venus rules cotton. And this happened and that happened. Pluto rules oil. When Pluto went into Sagittarius, I predicted that oil would go to $100 a barrel. It was trading at $17 a barrel. They all laughed at me at the Princeton Club where I was doing a series of lectures. When it hit $100 a barrel, when it hit $50 a barrel, they weren't laughing anymore. Then it went into Capricorn and the price of oil completely tumbled. And Saturn conjuncted Pluto and oil went to below zero. This past winter, they were paying people to take the oil out of their place, the place where they were keeping it, because it cost them too much money. They wanted you to take the oil that went below zero to minus $17 a barrel. First time ever. So what happened with the Saturn-Pluto conjunct is that Saturn, being where we get the name Satan, it's the planet of karma, we call it, of responsibility, took hold of that Pluto and began the Pluto return, because again, we sense these things years before they complete, and opposed America's Mercury. So what happened was, also America's about to go through Neptune opposite Neptune. Infection. We have this massive infection that America now is the epicenter of it, interestingly enough, or it was for quite a number of months. So I think that the Saturn-Pluto conjunct did what it was supposed to do, which was force us to focus, to put the blinders back on. We can't be distracted by anything, including Donald Trump's ranting and raving. We have to focus on things. Well, enough of the population agreed. Donald Trump is gone. Now we'll wear the masks.
Thank you, Mitch. Wow, that's all really fascinating, especially your knowledge with using astrology to read the markets.
Oh, it was great fun.
Yeah,
and I got a good reputation down there. They used to run a newsletter called Trading by Starlight about the commodities, and I had a lot of wealthy guys who were paying me to. It's fun, and I made a good living for a lot of years. So it is something, and astrology works when dealing with stocks and things. If anybody's interested, please get in touch with me. I'll tell you some books to read or whatever you want to know. It's fun.
All right. Thank you, Mitchell.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have Marty Dixon. So excited to welcome you.
Hello, everyone. Let me get my screen up here. And Linda, is my screen full? And
Yes.
okay, I'm good. Okay.
Yes.
So let me know if you can't hear me or if my screen is not cooperating.
Actually, go to full screen.
Does that help a little bit?
That will be fine.
Okay, and the audio is okay?
Yes. Actually, full screen would be better. In the
Full
bottom,
screen?
yes, bottom right corner, move over about 4 inches. You'll see that. Yes, that one. Yes. That's it. That's better.
Are we good?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Stacie. Thank you, Mitchell, esteemed colleagues, all of you. I'm going to weigh in, of course, on Kamala Harris's chart. And I'm not a political astrologer, but I told Linda I had a dream about her, and I thought that it might be a really good idea to honor that dream, since I do speak about Neptune in dreams. And I started out as a medium, so I tend to see a lot of parameters that may not be apparent to everyone, but they're still there. And I get promptings from, say, the subconscious mind, and I've learned to act on them. So I believe that there's an element about Kamala that wants to be recognized, and that's what I'm here to try to speak to and voice. Every chart is a hologram, and once you get the general scope of why a soul has reincarnated this lifetime, you can start to unravel a story. Well, when you have dreams or impressions or visions of a person with power, and you see them in light, and you see energy and feel energy all around them, that is a message saying to tell my story. And it's sort of like cheating in astrology, because you really get a sense of the chart before you really dig into it. So I'm going to speak about her and try to tell specifics as well. And in evolutionary astrology, as in any astrology, important themes will repeat again and again, coupled with the input of the native, the person who's telling their story, so that you'll know you're on the right track. So this is Kamala, and she's born, as you can see, let me get my marker here, bear with me just a moment, in the 5th house, and she is Libra, with combust Mercury in Scorpio. Mercury is combust the sun. That means she is fused with her power to speak and her orator powers. And this is something that she's had for some time, including past lifetimes, because we see the south node of Mercury is also in Scorpio, and the north node of Mercury is in Libra. So I do work with the universal planetary nodes, and let me see here. And so I can see a storyline here where she's come from a place of power, and perhaps a place of, we don't know, manipulation, Scorpio, or someone who really gets results when they speak, but she's lending more toward just fair speech, open and fair and universal speech in the signature. A moment, let's see if I can get something done here. It's not gonna work. Okay. So she's able to express herself and to compel her audience regardless of how you look at this signature. And there's no judgment in terms of perhaps she was strategic in the past, or she's learning to be more open and fair-based now. We have no idea, but we can see that the Mercury did come from a place of persuasion and control and power in the past. And because it's close to Neptune, I do think that this could have been some kind of a religious control or persuasion that she had over other people in past lives, and it's come into this life, and it's being somewhat reborn and remodeled and reshaped. Okay, let's see. So her moon is in Aries, in the 11th house of great change and liberation, the house of Uranus or Aquarius, and she shows a very deliberate, progressive, but passionate determination as a woman who wants to again who again is well spoken and wants to be heard. She can encourage dialogue, and she can also inspire others to speak up and speak their truth and walk their talk. And as you can see here, the moon is conjunct the south node in Chiron. So it looks, the universal south node. So it looks to me like she is actually trying to undo something from her past where perhaps she was hesitant to speak before. And then the Mercury here is conjunct the north node of Chiron. So it does look like she's come a very long way in terms of perhaps wanting to speak and suppressing her speech. And the time right now, ringing like a bell, is her time to speak up, and she has waited lifetimes for this. This is a woman of power. No matter what you think of her, she's controversial, of course. You know, she's a woman of color and power and very well educated. She's going to be criticized very heavily, but this is a woman to watch. She's waiting for her moment to act very patiently. Her north node is in Gemini on the ascendant. This is very, very powerful as well, because she's really coming to know herself and her true identity and her sense of self as a person and her position in the world. Look at that north node in Gemini rising. she's a free thinker, and she has a heightened sense of duty in the world. And she will be looking for her opportunities, believe me, and her moments to act. She's just waiting very patiently to speak up and speak her piece. And she would greatly identify with her orator abilities. She's a great speaker. She's been doing this for a very long time. And the North Node in Gemini is also conjunct the universal planetary North Node of Uranus and the universal North Node of Mars. So if you just look at this and use your sixth sense, you can see that she's highly persuasive. People listen when she speaks, North Node of Mars, and the North Node of both of these retrograde. She has come back to be a strong woman, a woman of color, and speak her piece for other people, not only for herself, and not only to, here I get passionate. I can just feel it. I'm just shaking. Not only to be a person to encourage others to speak their minds, and people of color and the disenfranchised and the underprivileged, but she's also encouraging people to pick up the pace and keep that pace going. Kamala Harris is the antithesis to Donald Trump. And I can't stress enough this North Node in Gemini. She's keeping the gates of the mind open. And that's what Ruth Bader Ginsburg did as well. She said, I can't paraphrase her, but she said, I'm here to create change, and I want to keep the door open for other generations and the young people to keep following in my footsteps. I'm just opening the door. Here's her Mars in Leo. I believe it's conjunct Donald Trump's Mars. I'm not sure, but someone else can back me up on that. That's what I heard. Okay, I'm sure we'll get to that in a moment. But her Mars is in the third house of mobility and approachability and someone that can really move and make great strides in Leo. And this is a woman who is really coming to know her own power this lifetime. Born in the fifth house and Mars in Leo, she has a preponderance of Leo energy. And Leo energy is learning to creatively self-assert oneself and to sort of rebirth oneself this lifetime. We could get into the archetypes of Leo and Leo signatures in a birth chart, but Jeffrey had said that when you have a prominent Leo signature in a chart, it could be that you're coming from a basic place of insecurity and you must assert yourself, or a supposed place of insecurity, an overemphasized place of insecurity. So if that is the case, think of her in comparison to Donald Trump. She's using any kind of inferiority complex to push herself forward and to have a voice and to help encourage other people to follow as well and to speak up. Mars is in balsamic phase to Pluto, which can signify a culminating soul desire manifesting in this life, to come to know and express their intrinsic worth and encourage others to do the same. Pluto conjunct Uranus and Venus in the fourth house, also conjunct the universal North Node of Venus. She has some intensely private and emotional, deep-seated desire to create lasting and effective change. This lifetime is very primary for her. She not only from a personal level, but to affect the good of the whole, Virgo. Uranus, the need to liberate from past guilt, fear, or conditioning, is in a culminating, absolutely conjunct degree to Pluto. There's a lot going on for her that just hits the mark this lifetime. Venus is new phase to Pluto, offering a renewed sense of pride in oneself, coming to embrace one's own deep emotional security, fourth house, and to throw off past religious or fear-based control or manipulation. Her Venus South Node is in the fifth house here. And it could be that she's throwing off past religious, cultural conditioning and coming to, like I said, coming to really speak up and face her fears this lifetime. And that is so different to me, so opposite to me from someone like our president who tends to be immersed in his fear and not really facing it and not really dealing with it, not really being assertive in that regard. She's a highly accomplished, polished, confident, and powerful woman. Her emotion would be one of her truths and strengths. So I hope you see what I'm trying to say. She's using whatever insecurity or supposed disadvantage she has felt or perceived in life and using it to help raise herself up in a positive way to unite people and not not separate them, and be a voice of hope. And that's what I want to give in the few minutes that I have. Is I feel very hopeful with this up and coming woman who I do believe is going to serve very well in a position next to Joe Biden. She has Jupiter in Taurus on the 12th house, which is our relationship to Creator. Her relationship to self, Taurus, and her embracing of self-love, which she has had to come into this lifetime with this retrograde signature here, is tied to her relationship with Creator, and her ultimate values and ultimate sense of purpose and reason for living is tied to her ability to have dialogue with Creator and encourage others to do the same. So she's very inspiring. She's a very bright light in a very dark world. And I know she's been through a lot. I can just sense that she's been through a lot, and that darkness has buoyed her to the surface and given her a voice and the courage to speak up. She's finding a renewed sense of belonging and expanded tribe in relationship with Creator this lifetime. So she is an ethnic woman. She's born of Jamaican and East Indian descent, and I think that she very much identifies with these traditional ways of life, but she's also opening up and offering that to the world on a grand public scale. In short, you can see that her journey may be a lonely journey. It may be, in the past, she may have felt that she was a committee of one with the moon in Aquarius, but she is learning to speak up and expand and feel her power and gain momentum. Real quickly here, her life sequence is that she's an American lawyer and politician. She served as a junior U.S. Senator from California from 2011 to 2017. She was born to an Indian mother, Shamala, and a Jamaican father, Donald. Her mother was a prominent breast cancer researcher who immigrated from India in 1960. Her brother, a Stanford University economics professor who immigrated from Jamaica in 1961 for graduate study in economics at California UC Berkeley. Her mother and dad met at a civil rights protest in UC Berkeley, and Kamala was born 2 years later. So she was born in the proverbial civil rights demonstration. She was born there. She learned to debate as a child at the dinner table. They were very passionate in their political discussions as a child. And if you had an opinion as a child, you could voice it, but you had to back it up with facts or reasons as to why you had your opinion. Her father left when she was 8. Her mother raised 2 daughters as a single parent, a very strong woman, but she passed away when Kamala was in her early 50s. And you can see from the chart, I'll just go back one moment, that here the moon representing her mother is a very strong mother who instilled what she needed to instill in her daughters. And I feel so much of this signature is what Kamala is passing on to us. You can see that she was previously the 32nd Attorney General of California. She was California's third female U.S. Senator and the first of Jamaica or Indian descent. She is a Democratic vice presidential nominee, for those of you who don't know, running alongside Joe Biden. And she is the first African-American woman and first South Asian American person to be chosen as the running mate of a major party's presidential candidate, the third female vice president nominee in history. This is a Sibley chart. Let me get to that point real quickly. And I just want to point out again that she does have a sense of special destiny. The sun in the 5th house and Mars in Leo can be translated or interpreted very different ways. But because I do feel she is an evolved soul, I do not feel that she is entrenched in power as some other people may be, her opponents. But she is using her. She has rebirthed herself and pulled herself up by the bootstraps to be a strong voice of change this lifetime. And in effect, she is actually using her new perceived personal power to be an effective force in the world. How are we doing, Linda?
That's it. That's it.
Okay, that's it. Let me just summarize and say that Jeffrey had warned us that there would be fanaticism, religious fanaticism, prominent during these last days, especially with the Pluto configuration in Capricorn. Jupiter and Saturn will both ingress to Aquarius around the December solstice, the winter solstice, and then Jupiter precedes the Pluto-Saturn stellium starting around the last week of December. There's hope. I believe she is a leader of this hope. I believe she is the embodiment of truth, freedom, and justice, and she's about to speak up and speak to the polarized factions that we have in society today and in our culture. And because Jeffrey had cautioned against the real battles and extremes of religious fanaticism, he also included in that, don't forget that we have extremes of all religious factions, including Christian fanaticism. And I think that Kamala is bringing a level-headed voice to include people and not divide them, and let everyone have a say in our democratic process. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Marty. Oh, I just love that. I just love your interpretation of Kamala Harris's chart. It made complete sense to me. I agree with you. The thing that I really appreciate about Kamala is that she has all of these Leo signatures, which is like you have something special, radiate. She's coming from a place of humility with that Pluto, Uranus, and Venus in Virgo. That's an underdog right there. You know, that is in her soul, underdog. But yet she has this energy that is coagulating in her consciousness, where she knows she has power because it's natural law. And it's like she has found confidence in it in this life. And so I really get that impression.
Well, I just want to point out that the one chart I didn't get to is the Sibley chart, and I do use the 3 a.m. Sibley chart that Jeffrey gave us. I know that with Gemini rising, and so that would put her ascendant right dead on, only by a few degrees, with the Sibley chart of the United States. And what Jeffrey said is that he uses a 3 a.m. chart, and I think a lot of other people use like a 5 p.m. chart, if I'm correct, with Sagittarius rising. They both work. The 3 a.m. chart is when he said the inspiration or the inception for the idea of a democratic constitution took effect. And I do believe with her orator powers and her persuasive powers, she's going to help create new laws and, guidelines for America so that we will never have a president that can try to be dictator again.
Yes, she certainly has the markings of a democratic leader.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Marty. Okay. Next we have, let's see, I think it's Sue Hilliard. We have Sue Hilliard, our asteroid expert.
Easy for you to say. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that we have 5 planets all in their own rulership, with the moon in Cancer, Venus in Libra, Mars in Aries, Saturn in Capricorn, and Neptune in Pisces today. So it's like we're running on all cylinders, and I think tremendous things can come out of all of this.
Yeah.
So what my contribution is about is what asteroids add to the picture. And so I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I'm also going to stop my video for connection issues and share my screen. And okay. So this is the election day chart, which I've used before. And you can see that chaos was conjunct the 8th house vertex in this chart cast for Washington, D.C. At 7 a.m. when the polls opened on the East Coast. Mercury is still not moving much now, even for a few more days. And it is also tightly square Saturn, having just perfected this morning, indicating that we still do not have an official winner. And there are delays in reporting the results, and some have been called into question. We've got recounts probably on order, but we're on our way. Black Moon Lilith was opposite the sun within a degree. Asteroid Arizona was conjunct Pluto exactly, suggesting that the state could figure into the election. Arizona Democrats have won 2 key races in Congress recently, and the state is now shifting towards blue. And I had said last time that it would be interesting to see if there was any correlation with this asteroid in the election, especially with regard to their statehood chart having transiting Pluto in a square to their lunar nodes. And here we are. First, here I had shown us before some meanings about the asteroids that I've used. And again, I won't read them, but you can take a screenshot, or if anybody wants a PDF of my slides, just let me know or Linda know and I can get them to you. But the main ones that I think are important are Hygeia, talking about health, prevention, not a cure. Pan and Pandora, which also the root of that is pan, which is all, the whole, all inclusive, and it's the root of pandemic, which has been a big issue in this election. Atlantis and Hygeia, Atlantis and Hybris talk about hubris, which has also been a big issue all along. And then chaos, which is the vast void or a chasm, the abyss or the emptiness before things came into being. And here's Arizona's chart, again with transiting Pluto in the 11th, square their nodes. Eris conjunct the 2nd house north node, which will ultimately have 3 passes of transiting Mars, and stationing Mercury very close to their south node. Transiting asteroid Hygeia in the 6th, opposite natal Mercury and Hygeia natally, echoing again health concerns as a possible issue. And Arizona's race has been called for Biden by the Associated Press, but not CNN or any of the other news outlets yet. Another state that has played into the outcome is Wisconsin. Even after the Supreme Court overturned a federal judge's ruling allowing ballots to be received up to 6 days after the election, which would have been until the 9th, there were enough votes to call the state for Biden. Interestingly, Wisconsin's 10th house natal sun is minutes from the coming lunar eclipse point of November 30th. And here, transiting North Node is conjunct their natal Mercury and also Trump's North Node. Transiting stationary Mercury is conjunct natal Coronis and Karma, and opposite natal and progressed Pluto. All are being squared by transiting Saturn, and transiting Coronis is conjunct natal Uranus. Natal Karma is squared by transiting Pluto. Progressed Karma and Coronis are conjunct one another near the IC. And opposite natal Sun and transiting Karma is square natal Venus. A lot of karma. Karma keeps showing up in all of these in a lot of these charts. I think we're experiencing some heavy karma at this point. And again, according to ABC News, the Trump campaign cannot file a formal recount request in Wisconsin until the last county has submitted its canvass to the statewide elections commission, which can happen any time between the 10th and the 17th of November. SCOTUS ruled, however, that Pennsylvania and North Carolina can receive ballots after Election Day, Pennsylvania until today, and North Carolina until the 12th. The full moon last weekend was conjunct transiting Uranus and fell across Pennsylvania's ascendant-descendant axis. Progressed Coronis is exactly conjunct the retrograde natal 4th house Mars in Cancer that is being opposed by transiting Saturn and squared by transiting stationary Mercury, which is conjunct natal Nemesis. Nemesis speaks about the divine force of restorative balance, redistribution of fortune. This is another one I'm noticing that's showing up prominently in quite a few charts. On Election Day, Saturn was conjunct Pennsylvania's 10th house moon, which represents in mundane astrology the people of the state, pointing to the voter suppression that has been going on, possibly. The transiting lunar south node is conjunct their 8th house sun, with the north node very close to their Jupiter. Transiting Mars squares 3rd house progressed Jupiter. And being at the end of his retrograde cycle, Mars will spend the next month within a degree of a conjunction to progress 12th house Caraclo and a square to progress Jupiter as he slows down and turns direct on the 13th. Caraclo is Chiron's wife, who holds space for healing to occur. Jupiter is about our beliefs and also correlates with the rule of law and legal battles. North Carolina is another state that has had its voting process during the pandemic under review. On Election Day, transiting Karma in Leo was exactly conjunct their 5th house Mars. This is exact to the minute. Transiting Mars, Coronis, and Eris have been interacting with their natal 6th house Neptune, 12th house progressed Hygeia, and Caraclo, all transiting or as transiting Pallas, Jupiter, and Pluto square them from the 10th house and conjoin progressed Capricorn Eris in the 10th. Eris is another one that has been showing up a lot in the fight here. Jupiter and Pluto will have their 3rd meeting on November 12th as Mars stations direct conjunct natal Caraclo and works its way back through the cardinal soup through the end of the year. After he moves into Taurus, he will eventually meet in squares with Jupiter and Saturn, who will have moved into Aquarius, and then on to a conjunction with unpredictable Uranus on January 20th in the afternoon of Inauguration Day, with transiting Neptune almost exactly square the moon's nodes. And here's the chart for Neptune squaring the nodes on January 26th, less than a week after inauguration, cast for Washington, D.C. Exactly conjunct Neptune and Ceres is Odysseus. Odysseus was a hero of the Trojan War. According to Alex Astrology, he was noted for his subtlety and guile. Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey, is about Odysseus's decade-long quest to return to his homeland after the war, and the term has become synonymous with any lengthy, taxing journey or process, and especially the retelling of it. The war itself drags on for 10 years, with first one side and then the other gaining advantage until both camps are exhausted. Odysseus conceives of a stratagem to take the city and causes the Greeks to fashion a huge wooden horse, ostensibly as an offering to Poseidon for their safe passage home. When the Trojans find the offering, they are elated that the Greeks have departed and bring the horse into the city as a memorial to their victory. But under cover of darkness, Odysseus and his men slip out, open the gates, and admit the returning Greek army into the city. Troy is sacked and burned, and most of its citizens slain. Our term a Trojan horse, meaning a trick or concealed stratagem for overcoming another, stems directly from this tale. Alex says that Odysseus represents cunning, guile, the ability to fool or manipulate others, keen intelligence, and perseverance or determination. It can also indicate exile or expatriation, long absence from home, extensive travel, and being homeless, ungrounded, or rootless. Seeing Neptune, Ceres, Odysseus, and the nodes all angular in this chart makes me wonder how this story might apply to us. In addition, Venus is conjunct the Saturn-Pluto point in a tight square to Eris, who is said to have tossed the golden apple of discord that ultimately started the Trojan War. Asteroids Pan and Coronis are conjunct second house Eris. Asteroid Hermes, messenger of the gods, is conjunct the south node in Sagittarius in the ninth house, also pointing to there being a story here. The moral of the story of Odysseus and the Trojan horse, according to Wikipedia, is looks can be deceiving. Georgia will have the Neptune nodal square right on their first house Gemini Jupiter. And on election day, the nodal axis is conjunct progressed Chiron and natal Mercury and square natal Pallas and asteroid Atlantis. The upcoming Jupiter-Saturn conjunction will be within a degree of their ninth house Venus in the first degree of Aquarius. Transiting Coronis is square progressed Jupiter and natal Mars, as well as opposite natal Neptune conjunct Hygeia. Transiting Jupiter and Pallas in Capricorn complete a cardinal cross that transiting Mars will activate for the third time after turning direct on the 13th. So it was announced today that there will be a recount in Georgia because the margin is so small. And I've talked about asteroid George before with regard to the killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter. But this morning I realized it could also, not only could it signify George Washington, Demetra George, but also Georgia. So I real quick looked to see and where it fell in their chart, and in lately, asteroid George has been moving back and forth over the south node in Capricorn and Sagittarius, and it's kind of been since January has been kind of following along with the what's been going on with the nodes in Capricorn and in Sagittarius. And Georgia, I found, has natal George at 27 degrees Libra, 51, and progressed George at 12 Scorpio, 53. So natal George was where Mercury turned retrograde, and progressed George is where the sun was on election day. Today, George is at 17 Capricorn, 28. On the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction at 22 degrees Capricorn, 52 minutes, George will be at 20 degrees Capricorn, 30 minutes. And on November 17th, George will be conjunct Pluto. Whew, okay, so this chart from worldometer.info has the current COVID statistics. And I just want to point out that we passed a grim marker. We have more than 108,000 daily cases the other day and 1,200 deaths. This is the backdrop of the election as a record number of people voted, many of whom braved the pandemic to do so. And I've shown this before, but this is the graph of the cases over time with the eclipses and Jupiter-Pluto and Pluto-Eris, as well as we had a Venus retrograde and out of bounds. it shows how the pandemic was affected as each one of these celestial events entered the fray. And this was from a presentation around the first Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, when the US had less than 125,000 active COVID cases, whereas now we have more than 3 million as we approach the third conjunction. The past two conjunctions seem to have indicated a rise in the number of cases, which doesn't bode well for the wave of new cases coming. And this is the same conjunction superimposed on the graph of the cumulative total of all cases, which is just about 10 million now. Okay, I have some of the charts that I've shown before, and this is Joe Biden's transits on the day of the election, stationing Mercury in the 11th, made a tight T-square with his natal Jupiter at 25 Cancer, and progressed Mercury at 25 Capricorn, transiting asteroid Chariklo, also conjunct. Mercury rules Biden's midheaven and his 7th house, and is also conjunct his progressed karma, and tightly squared progressed 3rd house Mercury, transiting Saturn in Capricorn, and progressed 8th house Black Moon Lilith, filling out the cardinal cross. Transiting karma is conjunct his progressed 9th house North Node and progressed Atlantis. Transiting Venus is conjunct his natal 10th house karma. I can talk about some other ones, but Chariklo and
Time's up, Sue. Sorry.
okay, this is a good place to stop.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Stu. That was, you're just an expert at looking at these patterns, especially with the asteroids. I really appreciate it. Just trying to think of what I want to hone in on. Talk about that aspect again when you were talking about the COVID reaching a new level. It actually wasn't 108, it was 120,000.
What was the new high?
That's a new high, 120,000 in one day.
And we're not even at the Jupiter-Pluto. The Jupiter-Pluto conjunction is on the 12th of November.
Yeah.
And each one of them has seen a jump in cases, along with all the other. I mean, to me, this is like the perfect storm of aspects over the year that, just kind of raise us up a level every time, just adding more variables into the mix.
Yes, for sure. And we've discussed before, the coronavirus is one of the major concern areas for Americans right now in the election. And it's the contrast between candidates is as extreme as it gets. You've got one going for herd immunity, let's infect everyone, versus one who says, no, let's get it under control. And there are followers on both sides.
Yes, they're 50-50 split almost. And the asteroid Coronis has been taken to signify the part of the pandemic, and it has been in Aries with Eris, and Mars has been going back and forth over it. It'll eventually itself, the asteroid has retrograded and gone back, and will eventually head into Taurus after. And then it will be with Uranus. So Uranus and Taurus. So then we'll probably be seeing the economic repercussions of this whole thing. Whew.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was amazing. Okay, so next on our list, we have Daniel Fiverson. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Stacie. This is such an amazing panel. I'm really honored and excited to really be here. Let me share my screen. Okay, let's get this up here. Excuse me 1 second. Why don't I see it? Hello. Here we go. All right. So in the first week, I talked about the impending Pluto return, the Neptune opposition. You'll see that I work with a rogue chart. I work with the chart that's less traveled by, and we'll come to that. But I want to unpack the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction today. So, Jupiter and Pluto meet up approximately every 12 years. Jupiter's the chapters of our lives, and it's about expansion and growth. And we know that it corresponds to natural law and the connection to that which is greater than ourselves. And Pluto carries our karmic imprint that ranges from the content of our DNA to our ancestral history. And it also includes the cycle of life lessons that we're working on individually and collectively. Pluto is about the sharing and exercise of power. Jupiter and Pluto are currently conjoined in the sign of Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, which is also of Capricorn. And Saturn and Capricorn are about form and structure. What we're witnessing in our world is the expansion of structured power. The reason that the GOP has come to the place that they have in our country is because they have understood what structured power is all about, and they have been working on it for quite some time. If we're going to push back against it, that's what we have to build from the left. Pluto is the engine that drives evolution. Countries also have evolutionary trajectories, just like people. And coronavirus and Donald Trump, as I said when we were discussing in the beginning, they're both collective homeopathic remedies that are applying evolutionary pressure to the forward direction of the United States. When Jupiter and Pluto meet, our personal growth can expand exponentially. The combination of expansion and power can also manifest as the misuse of power, as we've seen. And power can be aggrandized and self-importance can be exaggerated. Belief systems can be artificially supported by the exercise of authority rather than by natural law, especially given Saturn's domineering attitude. This year has been filled with personal development potential. The increased crisis-producing intensity has also resulted in increased output of shadow material. And that can be good if we're ready to embrace our shadow and to reintegrate it. And this can be challenging when we come face to face with the parts of ourselves that we are not ready to deal with, and when we encounter others who are also just not ready to do the work. So as we've seen, we've already had two conjunctions of Jupiter and Pluto this year. And with each conjunction, we have seen an increase in the spread of coronavirus, followed by a broad spectrum of social and economic restrictions. In April, the confirmed cases passed 1 million worldwide, and we had 68,000 deaths. At the June conjunction, we passed 10 million with 500,000 deaths. And today, we're approaching 50 million cases worldwide with an excess of 1 million deaths, and there have been also almost 10 million cases in the United States alone. So let's look at some of the things that have happened over those last two conjunctions, and I just want to highlight these areas of American life because the next few slides I'm going to see how the current conjunction that's going to occur in a week or so is going to really reflect each of these things that has happened, and in no particular order as we've seen the economy. Has been fluctuating wildly. We had the biggest one-day percentage since 1933, and then it fell almost 3,000 points, which was greater than the Wall Street crash of 1929. We had the $2 trillion stimulus package, and Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Apple Computer have become the most valued people and corporations in American history. But to balance that, the Department of Labor has also reported that almost 300,000 Americans filed for unemployment. For the media and the post office, we've had the Postal Service crisis, which thank God has, seems to have resolved itself. And we've had all the interactions by the media, and I especially want to highlight the New York Times and perhaps CNN, who, the Times pointing out about President Trump's tax returns, which he has fought viciously in all the courts time and time again to keep concealed. We've seen the effect on the people at large, the riots and protests that continue nationwide in Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Kenosha, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, and Rochester, New York. I guess that's a repeat. Foreign affairs, the biggie is Russian interference. We know that they interfered in 2016, and the FBI has warned that there was also interference in this election as well. And the judicial system is right on the radar. The Supreme Court rules that Trump must release his financial records, but he hasn't done it yet. Hopefully the Southern District of New York is going to have their day in court. And I think that's one of the things that I am personally praying for, along with many other people. And then we have, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett. And, from many perspectives, it just really belies, American ethics. And George Floyd and the number of Black lives that have just, been wasted. And democracy itself is at stake. I mean, he's still, he suggested delaying the election. He has said he's going to refuse a peaceful transfer of power, and he's fighting tooth and nail in every state where he wants recounts, but he only wants recounts where he's losing. I mean, this is what we're up against. The democracy is under attack. So, in general, if we look at the chart for November 12th, I'm calling it the expansion of structured power as Jupiter and Pluto conjunct at 22 degrees of Capricorn. We're confronted by our past. Jupiter is in a T-square with Eris and Mars and the Moon and Venus, all in cardinal signs. The disruptive energies continue to spin off chaotic circumstances that impel planetary and personal evolution forward with broader perspectives and new paradigms. Pallas Athena. Core instincts are awakened, Mars and Aries, that pressure our priorities, Venus, to reflect and implement our personal collective values and priorities. And this is all under a balsamic moon. And we know that balsamic moons are the most difficult because we cannot cross the barrier, to the new moon, into the new cycle, until everything that's hanging fire is resolved. And we're at that threshold. We've got one foot in the door. We can see our way to the other side, but we're not there yet. I want to look at the transits of the outer planets to the US chart that I use. It's the Declaration of War chart that I personally believe is the only one that's historically supported. It's not that I think the other charts are wrong. I think all of them have validity. They all work. It's just that I have found that this one really, the historical support of it to me is overwhelming. And I'll leave that to you to research if you care. So we're looking first at Jupiter, and in mundane astrology, Jupiter's the judicial system, or religious institutions, and the nation's wealth and banks. And you can see that it applies to a last quarter square to Mars, a last quarter trine to Neptune, a balsamic conjunction to Pluto, and an inconjunct to the lunar north node. And it's going to highlight the military, war, terrorism, conflicts, the fires, prisons, secret enemies, hospitals. This is the rulership of Mars, the rulership of Neptune in the 12th, in the socialism and pharmaceuticals, drug problems, COVID, the prisons, which we kind of hope comes into play. I don't think that we're going to see Donald Trump, just back on TV. If I think that he's either going to flee the country like other despots, or he's going to actually be run down by the Southern District of New York. Secret enemies and hospitals. The hospitals are overwhelmed. And public health, clearly, workers and trade unions. These are the people who are perhaps are uncounted in some of the polls. And Pluto, as the ruler of the second house, is the economy. We saw the wild swings, and we can expect the same thing to happen as this unfolds. These are, the events that occurred, over this year are just the beginning. This is a 12-year cycle. We're just going to begin to move through these areas of life, and they will unfold, over time. The lunar north node in the ninth house reflects the courts and religion, the universities. I don't know if anybody has college-age students who have gone back to school and are mixing with everybody in the midst of this pandemic. And the lunar north node in Leo is the striving to achieve our individual freedom of expression. It's what our country was born from, and it's what we've been struggling with since day one. Saturn is the elderly. It's the elderly who are most affected by this pandemic. National death rate, don't really need to expand on that. Life-threatening epidemics, it's pretty self-evident. Public sorrow and disappointment. And again, we see Mars, Pluto, the lunar north node, and Venus, all the same areas of our lives are coming up on the radar. The courts, the economy, foreign intervention, women's issues, democracy itself, all under pressure, all under fire. Uranus, it's technology, it's Donald Trump's space force, but mostly it's disruptive events and certainly, wild weather. And we have seen the wildest weather in my time on the planet, and I think everybody else's. It's separating from a first quarter square to Mercury. That's the media and transportation, the post office, and it's the ruler of the ninth house. Again, the Supreme Court and religion, which is playing such a large role in this election and in our life, and the university life itself. And Neptune, as I get, it's socialism and pharmaceuticals, and it's separating from a gibbous inconjunct to the moon, and it applies to a first quarter trine to the sun and separates from a gibbous opposition to Neptune. You see here all these same areas of life just being lit up, like a sign up, somewhere in Las Vegas, all under pressure, all being accentuated. And moving through the sixth house, the sixth house in EA is growth through crisis. We are being dissolved in Neptune, and it's creating these crises so that we can grow. Pluto is nuclear power and perhaps nuclear events as well. Government upheaval, terrorism, and clearly organized crime. Donald Trump had the nerve to call Biden's family a crime family. I mean, I think of all the things that he said, it's the one thing that really upset me the most. And it's separating from a last quarter square to the moon, a trine to Mars, a trine to Neptune, a conjunction to US Pluto, and an inconjunct to our north node. The north node is under heavy pressure here. And the same areas of life, again, are being lit up because it's this Capricorn stellium that's just working in concert on these same planets, these same areas of life, and just drilling down day after day, week after week, month after month, and setting in motion patterns and events that will really carry through for most of the decades to come, and maybe even further out. Certainly Saturn and Pluto, we're looking at 3 decades easily. And Eris, I do occasional radio shows here in Santa Fe, and they used to call me the asteroid guy. Now they call me the Eris guy because it's become my kind of pet project. Eris was responsible for the Trojan War, but Eris was also responsible for the birth of the Roman Empire. And she applies to an opposition to the US moon. You know, the moon in this chart is Donald Trump. It's the president, and it is also the people at large. It's also the country at large and the welfare of the country. And it's our democracy, you know, as the ruler of the fourth house. So as its place in the fourth house. So we're seeing you know, all these tremendous upheavals, which are really, you know, it's really responsible for it. And I assign Eris to really be the reason that we are having the chaos and discord that we're having. These outer planet conjunctions occur regularly. You know, they've occurred every 10, 20, 30 years, you know, through history. But this year is not unlike anything that's happened literally in almost 3,000 years. The last time Eris in Capricorn squared Pluto in Aries, Buddha was on the planet. That's something to, you know, to think about. And all the great thought streams of Western civilization came on the planet in the 6th century BC. That was the last time this transit happened. It's quite a significant and epic event that we are living through, and it's certainly not casual. The day after the conjunction, Mars stations direct, and I'm calling it the flashpoint. We should be prepared for a political firestorm. No question. It's going to trigger all of the events that I've just described, because it is not only going to be moving towards a conjunction with Eris again, which is still retrograde, so they're going to just be moving together even a little faster, but it's going to square all those Capricorn planets. So it's going to set it off. We saw what happened in California and Oregon this summer and into the fall. We're going to see it politically happening as this year unfolds. You know, as Jupiter moves into Aquarius at the end of the year, Jupiter will go into Aquarius. It's going to go retrograde. It's going to spend the entire 2021 in Aquarius, and almost immediately be squared by Uranus. The Uranus-Jupiter square is going to, we may not be having, you know, these major conjunctions that we had in 2020, but the Uranus square is going to kick them all up to the next level. We have not even begun to see the level of intensity that these conjunctions can create. Mars is going to carry forward all the old wounds to be healed and raged against. We're seeing them. We're seeing the white supremacy, the xenophobia, the misogyny that I profess, you know, disembarked on the Mayflower. It's been here since day one. It's been here for 400 years. It's not going to go away easily. But the good news is that it's all being outed. And we can expect increased and continued protest, outrage, chaos, and discord. Certainly, we've seen what Trump supporters have done before the election. We have to expect that they're going to kick it up a notch once he's, you know, on his exit strategy. And how are we balancing our need for self-expression with the requirements for peaceful community? And there's an increased necessity to change past behavior regarding our health. That's what COVID is doing. It's showing us that we need to take on self-care. We live in a fix-me world. If our cholesterol level goes up, we go to the doctor, he gives us a pill. You know, we have to learn to take care of ourselves. We cannot depend. Nobody's coming to save us. The takeaway is that each of us needs to take advantage of this.
Time's up now, Daniel. Sorry, you've gone over. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right.
I would just like to get the end of your sentence, Daniel, please.
Okay. The takeaway is that each of us needs to take advantage of the sequester and to use it for our own personal development. Outer world events are unfolding on their own timeline. Astrologically, we are passing through a period which relates directly to the war between the states and the revolution that separated us from mother country England. Regardless of the outcome of this election and the contentious aftermath that is already brewing, the causes of our national political polarity remain: the xenophobia, misogyny, and white supremacy which disembarked the Mayflower. Clearly, current events are telling us that the time has come for evolutionary change. Let us all use the sequester to work on ourselves. Isn't that the real reason that we are here? And that's what I've got.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And we don't know which way it's going to go, do we? You know, you brought up the judicial aspect of the government, and this is a bit of a concern right now because, as we know, Donald Trump wants to stop the counting of the votes. He wants to take it to the Supreme Court to stop the votes. Say more about that scenario.
Well, you know, he's going to use everything he's got up his sleeve. And, you know, one of the things that we have to pay attention to is that, you know, and again, I don't want to, you know, instill any fear in people, but a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. And he has not shown any kind of sensibility or anything that we can trust. And, you know, that's what he does on a good day. So we're headed into, you know, he still has 2 months left in office. Okay. So, you know, I leave it at that, you know, just you do the math.
Yeah, yes, that's a really important point. You know, I'm going to agree that I believe that Donald Trump has a level of sociopathy within his psychology. And one thing that sociopaths tend to do is if they're going to lose, they're going to make sure everyone comes down with them.
Right.
So, but there is this fight between the people, and, you know, something's changing, something's emerging, and all of these trends that you just spoke about are really going to show us what we're made of. So
it comes down to each one of us taking responsibility for ourselves. And the bottom line is that democracy is an active verb. We have to live it, and it's more than just voting. We have to become good citizens in whatever that means to us.
That's so true. Thank you for pointing that out, because that's really all it comes down to, is being responsible for ourselves and learning how to integrate as people. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Michaela Villiers-Kendall. Welcome, Michaela.
Hi. Thanks. Okay, so yeah, well, on election night, I mean, God, yeah, it does your head in, doesn't it? All of this, so much to take in, so much happening. But on election night, I had my laptop on the bed next to me, and I had the election on all night, which was probably not a good idea. I kept waking up every so often and thinking, oh, that's good, someone's gone ahead and do a chart. Oh, mad, absolutely mad. I was doing that throughout the night. Anyway,
you're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah, so anyway, so the last time it happened, I woke up to hear that there was an announcement saying there'd been a burst pipe in Georgia. And it hadn't happened, obviously hadn't happened just at that moment, but they were talking about it and said it had, and it disrupted things. But at the next, so I thought, that sounds very Neptunian, I'm going to do a chart. So I started doing the chart for the announcement. And the next thing, Donald Trump came on that next minute, and he started making his speech about, you know, about it being fraud, and weirdly, Neptune, the USA Neptune in the chart was rising at that moment. So it seemed to be very synchronistic and pointing right at Neptune. So I did the chart for it, and this was it. And obviously you see the moon is squaring. I mean, it's like, wow. And you've got Neptune opposing the other side, and you've got the nodal axis in Gemini. So it's making a huge grand cross, mutable grand cross, really dominated by the USA Neptune in the 10th house in the USA chart. So I thought I'd go into that then and see what that's sort of saying. And since the focus was on it, and And it did draw my attention to the fact that Neptune, which I think I've been overlooking it quite a lot. I mean, Neptune seems to sneak in there in the back door. And we've been focused on the Pluto and the Saturn and the south node of Saturn and of Pluto and of Uranus and of, you know, all the rest that's going on so much. But anyway, so Neptune, I looked into the history of Neptune in Pisces. Oh, it's interesting too. And at that moment, yeah, Trump was saying it's a fraud, and Biden came on there saying keep the faith. So that's the two sides of Neptune. You know, it's a fraud, keep the faith. So which one do we go with? Both, hopefully. Well, maybe the faith is better. Anyway, so so I looked into the background of it, and I think do the next chart probably. Go into that because there's not much time. Okay, so well, that shows Joe Biden's chart too. It shows actually that Neptune is about to go into his 4th house, and that's a strange time to becoming president. I mean, you would think he would retire, and maybe he, you know, it does actually go in next year, shortly, I think, after the if he does become president, shortly after the inauguration, not too long, really. And maybe that's when Kamala Harris has to step in, like Marcy was saying. And interesting, actually, about Kamala Harris. I mean, her sun and her moon, her full moon, is squaring Pluto in the Pluto, America's Pluto, USA's Pluto, which I think pertains to what we're just going to talk about, which is the next chart, because the last time that, yeah, okay, the last time, this is the, yeah, so this is when Lincoln was elected, and this is the US chart, and Neptune was in Pisces, and it opposed, at this point, it was going into opposition of the US Neptune. So it was doing its opposition. And at that point, that was in 1858, that began. And that's when the abolitionists, there started to be big fights about abolishing slavery, which led, you know, when Lincoln was elected, you know, he took that on, and obviously the Civil War came out of that. So that was that period. Amazingly, actually, I mean, that's what's strange about Neptune in America's chart. It's right up there. It's in the 10th, and it does, you know, it does stand for faith and spirituality, but it also has the other side to it. So it's like the Dionysian sort of, yeah, two-faced. Which one do you go with? So, but strangely, when it's in the 4th and when it's opposing itself, then the spirituality comes up, and that what's wrong, you know, what's wrong with having slaves, as you know, Daniel was saying, and I think Mitch was saying about, for goodness sakes, the founding fathers had slaves, and in the end they were talking about equality, they were talking about freedom and the pursuit of happiness in the Constitution, and yet it was okay to have slaves. Something's very strange about that. And weirdly, even, you know, UK, the middle country, had been having discussions about and fights about abolishing slavery for 50 years before they actually abolished it in 1838. And so they started during the French Revolution to talk about abolition, but it took 50 years to get it stopped. But even in 1838, America was still going on, and they didn't actually start fighting about it until Neptune came into Pisces. Interesting, you know, came towards its return. Anyway, so when Lincoln got in, well, then there's the Civil War, and that picture just there was Massacre of the Abolitionists. So that's what happened last time. I mean, it's interesting that it's all come up now. Anyway, going on from that, then yeah, that's in the Second World War. That's when Neptune returned. So it returned to its place then. And you've got the Second World War. I put the Manhattan Project there because that began in 1942. Strangely enough, I mean, that's when 1942 was when Biden was born. And of course, he's got his Neptune on the midheaven of the US chart. So his Neptune's on the midheaven, and actually Trump's is only at 5 degrees Libra, which is, so it's still conjunct the US chart. So they've both got their Neptunes up there. And that's interesting. And I mentioned the Manhattan Project because that was sort of the atomic bomb and the Holocaust was sort of the two main focal points of World War II, the two main things that came out of it. And both of them, when you think about it, were about power, genocide, you know, all the Plutonian stuff. And the other thing that's interesting is that Uranus has a very, does a dance with Neptune, as most of the planets do a dance with each other. And it, every time that Neptune, you know, gets up to the square or the opposition or the conjunction, the return, then you've got Uranus is doing the square to what happens to be the nodes of the US chart, in Aquarius, South Node Aquarius, North Node Leo. So it's doing it. So it was it Taurus in the Second World War, or was it Scorpio? No, it was, yeah. So it was either Taurus or it was Taurus again, like it is now. And I think, and it's called the bendings. It's called the bendings when it's going towards the North Node or the South Node. It's going towards the North Node because the North Node's in Leo. That corresponds very, very closely with the planetary nodes, which Jeffrey Wolf Green, of course, talks about a lot. Actually, there's talking about Neptune. It's very good by our own Linda. Edited by, and I think there's a couple of chapters in there by you, isn't there, Linda? But anyway, very good. And it talks about the nodes and the planetary nodes of Neptune, which are in Aquarius, South Node Aquarius, North Node Leo. And they correspond quite closely to the American axis, except they go like 9 degrees Aquarius, Leo to 13 degrees. And interestingly, the bendings, Uranus now is going to be, it's starting the square. So it's starting to do the bendings up to not only the planetary node of Neptune, the North Node in Leo, but also it is right on, it is absolutely squaring USA's nodal axis. So it's all sort of coming together. But as Daniel was saying, all of this, I mean, it's nothing's going away. There is going to be no savior. It's really, yeah, up to us to all to get conscious. And interestingly, yeah, saying about consciousness, Jeffrey Wolf Green's quote, Neptune, your individualized consciousness relative to the collective consciousness of all humans. And that seems to be what's represented in America's chart right up there on the 10th. And yeah, here we go, down into the 4th, into the IC, as Daniel said, to get rid of the poison, to look what's down there, what poison actually is down there. And it's all coming up with the Pluto stuff. So anyway, moving quickly on. To the eclipses, yeah. So, and so you can see it there. That's starting with the next eclipse, which is 30th November. And that's at 9 degrees Gemini, which is actually, I think that's pretty much conjunct USA's Uranus. So there you have a Uranian, you have a Neptune. Yeah, it's all doubling up. But that's actually in Donald Trump's chart. He has the solar eclipse. That was his natal prenatal eclipse. So he's got that correspondence going on. He's got the prenatal eclipse, the solar eclipse of his prenatal lunar eclipse, and then later December 14th, 23 Sag. He obviously had the lunar eclipse prenatally, well, natally, he was born on it, and this will be the solar eclipse. So it's like a mirror going on, and I do think we're going to be hearing quite a lot of him, as I said before, for a long time before this is all. There's a lot to play out, I think, really, but it's not boring, is it? Anyway, perhaps I'll stop there. Anyway, as you can see here, it lines up with, you know, at the very end of these eclipses anyway, June 10th, which, and that again is, that's, which eclipse is that? Hold on, that's the middle one, that's the outer one. So it goes from inner to outer. And so that's, where's it gone? Oh yeah, so that's at 20 degrees Gemini. Again, it's like, whoa, we're getting that emphasized again 6 months later after the December eclipse. And so there you go. And at that time, Uranus actually has got to the bendings, absolutely, of that last degree of the planetary nodes, 13 degrees Leo, Aquarius. It's got to the bendings, 30 degrees Taurus. So it should be fun, but it's evolutionary, isn't it? As Jeffrey would say.
It is, for sure. And it's you know, we all chose to be here in this time.
Oh.
So it really is an act of deciding what our priorities are and how are we going to use our power.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on. So you were saying that Biden's Neptune is on USA's MC.
Yeah.
And then Trump has, and then what was the other thing that you said that Trump had in Libra? What were you pointing out there?
Well, he has Neptune in Libra too, because obviously he hadn't gone that far. He was born 4 years after Biden, but Biden's is the closest on the USA, pretty much, almost, you know, within a degree, I think, of the midheaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was interested to see where those Neptunes connected the USA and Donald Trump, but it's a pretty wide.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and it's true. It's the contrast is really quite amazing. You have one person saying that this Democratic vote is fraud, and then you have another person saying, be patient, keep the faith.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people listening to both sides, you know.
Polarized.
Yes. And so this is a true decision point for America to decide and to put our flag in the sand or whatever it is, you know, to say this is what we're for, but we're so divided that it's hard to tell.
Sure.
But
True.
but happily it seems as though good things are playing out, and that there is a little bit more embracing of things that we need to embrace, things that may not be pretty, but it's things that we have to focus on. You know, I mean, how is it that in this day of 2020, we still have people having a problem with the fact that if you have a human who is Black and you have a human who is white, that there's some kind of difference in importance. We're still talking about it.
We're here at the next pass of Neptune, still trying to get it right. It's weird, isn't it? It takes so long.
Yes, it is. It is. It seems
but that's
like
the world. It's not just America. It's the focal point. America's the focal point, but it's the world's.
Well, yeah, and if you listen to most people talk, most people will say, "Oh, yes, everyone's equal," but are they really saying what they think? And this is all what's being presented to us, and
showing it up.
It's a time of taking account. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Michaela. Okay, who do we have now? We have Chad Alexander Harris. Welcome, Chad.
Hi.
Hi.
It's good to be here. Thank you so much, Stacie and Linda and the panel. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. Actually, all right. So I think I'll just piggyback on where we were there on the importance of this moment and the accountability, the facing shadow, and the personal responsibility that Daniel was mentioning. And it's interesting, like the Saturn-Pluto conjunction to me corresponds to the moral evolution, facing the shadow that is, clearly present at the moment. And it's interesting that the United States was born, or well, the US Constitution was drafted and put into action in 1787 during a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And here, let me just go to that real quick. And it is kind of a paradox, like both, individual rights, freedom for what it was sanctioned for white men in particular, and it also enslaved African Americans at the same time. But both, are true in a sense. We both had a moral evolution that allowed for more dignity for human beings, but yet not in a full measure. So today is another opportunity, really, with Black Lives Matter and the racial reckoning that's taking place, to change, to put in more laws, to face our shadow and to right those wrongs and put in more laws that protect individual sovereignty, Saturn issues. So yeah, I think that was sort of an important place to start where you guys are left off. And then just on what's happening right now, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is the karmic reckoning for Donald Trump as well. It's opposing his natal Saturn, corresponds to his inability to tell the truth and have an uncorrupt character, let's say. And it is a very important moment. I mean, this today even is one of the more important days in American history, because the way that Donald Trump responds to what happens, the way Biden responds and the way we respond, will shape in large measure where we go from here. And like, honestly, this is where I kind of think there's a bit of grace in the fact that it wasn't a giant landslide and a repudiation of Trumpism, because that would have made it easy for him to call fraud and then bail and be like, it's fraud. And in a sense, I think it would be easier for the QAnon and that movement to kind of feel like they were rejected by society and then close back up, like the racism that's out would go more back into the shadows in a sense. Whereas now, like, Trump actually has an opportunity to not double down again, because it was close, and he can stay in political public power through his Twitter feed and everything through the next 4 years. He can run again. And if he makes proper decisions, like, there's a way in which he can save grace, he can save face, if he doesn't completely double down on fraud and reject the entire, continue to burn down the democracy. But, I'm just saying, like, there is an actual opportunity for him to pivot a little bit here, and it would do him a lot of good. And it would, whatever, I don't want to go too much into that, but it's a really interesting phenomenon. But I guess we should point out that the eclipses that were on his Mars for Charlottesville, on his Pluto, or on his Saturn for Helsinki, and on his Mercury for the perfect call, now have moved on to his moon and sun. And we really are going to see a kind of pure sense of who he is. So, I mean, honestly, I'm praying for him. Like, I hope that the most grace that can happen at this moment takes place. So what's interesting is the Mars, Saturn, Pluto alignment that we'll get to in a minute, that's going to color the next couple of months right up through the inauguration. John Lewis also had a Mars, Saturn conjunction square to Pluto in his natal chart. And you can see how he embodied that complex in an extremely noble way, where he had the courage to take on face the overwhelming power and violence again that he was facing, and take the violence, actually take the beatings, rather than be an actor of violence. He received it for the higher standard, for the higher good. And that is also a potential for us as well over the next 3 months. Like, we don't have to slip into the shadow side, antagonizing each other and slip into potential violence. We can do a nonviolent standing up for, in really courageous ways, for what's right, So I just want to run through real quick, like how the Uranus-Pluto alignments that led to this moment and the Saturn-Pluto alignments that led to this moment, and then we'll look at what's happening right now. So the 1787, this is all drawn from Psyche and Cosmos as well. Richard Tarnas's Cosmos and Psyche, sorry. And so the 1787 to 1798 Uranus opposite Pluto alignment that correspond to the French Revolution was also when the abolitionist movement began its real beginnings. And you can see all of these events began in that decade. And then the next alignment was the 1844 to 56 period, just prior to the Civil War, which Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, all of these things were radical revolutionary Uranus-Pluto phenomena that helped lead to the Civil War and the freeing of the slaves. So, and then in 1896, 1907, the next Uranus-Pluto opposition was W. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, and Gandhi, the National American Women's Suffrage Movement. There's lots of revolutionary phenomena that support freedom and independence, both for African Americans and for women, which they have a correlation. And then in the 30s, there was the square between Uranus and Pluto. And it's interesting, jazz actually played a tremendous role in just that, the kind of this allowing for a transcendent phenomenon to help bring integration along. And then the 60s, clearly Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement that was the abolitionist movement became the civil rights movement, and found, kind of culminated in the civil rights legislation and Voting Rights Act. So this decade that we just went through corresponded to the first Black president, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Occupy, movements, as well as the rise of China, which there were fascist correlations to the 30s, which I didn't mention. So you can see where there's this, Uranus-Pluto revolutionary impulse behind so much of what's taken place in this decade and what we're facing. And then at the same time, it's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction that corresponds to the personal individual rights, sovereignty issues, and also like the tendency for us to engage in psychological splitting and othering. So in the 1865 to 67 period, the Ku Klux Klan and the Knights of White Camellia, and then the 1882 to 84 conjunction was the first Immigration Act against Chinese people. In 1913, the World War I, and the Ku Klux Klan began its resurgence. And then in the Great Depression, 1929 to 33 period, the Holocaust and the World War II, 1946 to 48 was the beginning of the Cold War, but also the International Declaration of Human Rights. So like you see with the Constitution of the United States and the UN Declaration of Human Rights, both Saturn-Pluto conjunctions and declaring in law individual sovereignty rights for human beings. And then in 1980, the peak of the Cold War, the AIDS virus, we could just go to 1992 was the crime bill subjugating African Americans in many ways, and the Rodney King riots and the genocide in Rwanda. So the point is that this tendency towards psychological splitting, othering of each other becomes more of a prominent phenomenon during Saturn-Pluto periods, which we can see also taking place during, in our immigration struggles over the past few years it's current around the world. So the 2000 period, 2004 period was the 9/11 and all of the divisions that took place then. The last one, the subprime mortgage crisis and the Syrian civil war, our last recession, and now our current traumatic moment. But I have a hopeful outlook on this. So like disaster, the word is 16th century Italian, means ill-starred event. So like negation against the stars, right? So catastrophe also means like a downturning. Kata means down, strophe means turning. And so for the Greek mind, the heavens were eternal and perfect, and any downturning would be a turning away from the perfection of the heavens, or turning away from aligning oneself with the higher order. And apocalypse actually means to uncover. So much of what's taking place, it's not apocalypse, but it's revealing so much of the problematic dimensions of our society and the nature of our relationship, which is, Saturn Pluto on some level, it corresponds to racism, like that tendency to draw strong boundaries, Saturn boundaries, place the good on the inside and fear the other, and to project evil onto the other. And this is also a big part of our environmental crisis as well. But the word crisis itself means distinguishing decision or choice. So, and specifically a decision during the turning point of a disease, where that decision will lead to either recovery or death. So again, back to this importance of this moment and the decisions that we make surrounding the critical nature of the moment. So what I want to do now is look at, this is here, actually, just want to do, sorry, one more time. We'll just look at Joe Biden's chart real quick. I wasn't for Biden during the primaries, but now I recognize, he is the perfect candidate for this moment. Like there's no other candidate that was running that would be more perfect for this moment, in my opinion, as far as his experience in the Senate, his relationship with McConnell and the senators. It's like, it'll be much harder for them to belittle him and, the way that they would malign any of the other less experienced candidates. And there's a way in which his woundedness, he has Chiron on the North Node, and it's square to the Sun and Venus. Like he's deeply wounded in love. He's lost wife and child, multiple children to death. He's a stutterer, but he's overcome that, and the race relations aspect, he was the author of the 1994 crime bill, but he's apologized for it. He recognizes the evils in it. He berated Anita Hill in ways that were not noble, and he's apologized for them. And he, and she's forgiven him in certain ways, and is willing to work with him. There's so much promise in that, for our moment, as far as actually working on healing the race divisions that we have. So I have a lot of hope for Joe Biden and what's taking place at this time. And then where's that other chart? Sorry, can make it easy over here. Yes, okay. And so these are the transits, Joe Biden's transits for the inauguration. And what's fascinating to me, one thing, is that Pluto is opposing his natal Jupiter. Now, this is going to be, this will be a transit he has throughout his entire presidency. But at the inauguration moment, transiting Jupiter is exactly opposite his natal Pluto. So he has a double Jupiter-Pluto opposition, which you often see where resources and empowerment are a natural kind of occurrence, where you have more access to the depths, you are supported Jupiterianly to move into an empowered position. I mean, it's interesting, like, you know, he clearly was not, and recognizes himself that he shouldn't have been president at any time before when he has run. And he now, you know, it seems as though this was and is the perfect time for him to have won. So yeah, a lot of hope there. I mean, clearly also Saturn is opposite his natal Pluto as well. So it's not just empowerment. The burden and the division and the responsibility and yeah, everything about this moment is really important. Is that my time? I think so. Yeah. Right? No, not yet. But basically, I mean, there's what I didn't talk about here. I'll just go to, this is the current chart. Actually, shoot, let me do this. Okay, so this is a chart for right now where Mars is in a square to Jupiter, Pluto, and technically it was an 11-degree opposition to Mercury. It was a grand cross with the moon today, actually. So lots of tension. But what's interesting is Mars, I'm going to move in weeks here. So Mars will move into back through the square to Pluto and Saturn, as Daniel was talking about, conjoining Eris, and the potential for strife and violence is clearly there. And I think honestly, a lot of it depends on the clarity of the facts, how they are perceived by his base, and the way that he articulates what's happening, the way he describes it. You know, a lot will depend on that. Like, there was one arrest last night in Philadelphia of someone who drove their pickup truck to the convention center to like look for the ballots being fraud or something, you know, and just one of those crazy people. And like, so there's lots of those people out there, and, you know, where, you know, how many of them will be inspired to action, I don't know. But there's clearly a lot of that potential. But as Mars moves into the conjunction with Uranus, I mean, this could be both, you know, the beginning of a very disruptive, revolutionary, potentially protest-laden 4 years, and potentially violent, but it could be in a really noble way. It doesn't have to be in the unhealthy version of radical revolutionary violence. So I think I'm done, right?
Thank you, Chad.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That was great. You called to my attention. I opened this up and said it was November 5th. I've been awake all night, so
Yeah.
It's November 6th now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I kind of, this is kind of a silly thing to bring up, but I really appreciate you bringing up the advent of jazz and, you know, music that has emanated from the Black culture, jazz and blues and even rap. You know, there is so much soul that you can feel in those genres, and so I personally really appreciate it. You know, as for, yeah, I think it's a big deal that Biden has come out and said that the Crimes Bill Act was a mistake, because not all leaders will do that. You know, if we look at Donald Trump, he hasn't apologized for a single thing that he's done.
Exactly.
And, you know, one of the true indicators of leadership is when you can look at something that you've done and you've learned from the time that has progressed that, okay, that was wrong and let's adjust. That is so important. If you have a leader who won't even admit where they've gone wrong, then there is no adjustment. And so, and I agree. I think Joe Biden really has a message that is more unifying towards races and people. And then we have Donald Trump, who is, in my view, trying to incite another civil war. It's as if he gets a rise out of, people in Texas running a bus off the road, and people showing up with guns, and so it's just two different things, and it really is. This is our point of decision. What do we want to do? Who are we going to be? So I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's great. Just to tie back in, like jazz as a music coming out of African American culture, jazz in particular, but it was the transcendent nature of it, in my mind, that allowed for the unity to take place. For African Americans and white people to connect and participate in a transcendent phenomena that allowed the unity to take place in ways that would otherwise be very difficult to just talk through or something. And I believe the astrological perspective does something similar. I mean, it's a transcendent phenomena that unifies us. It connects all of us in harmony, in music, ultimately, in a way that we can see each other and actually have more compassion for one another, relative to our complexes and our, in our charts and stuff. So yeah, there's, I just wanted to point that out, but yeah, this is it's a critical moment for all of us. And the conscientiousness we bring to it and how we behave, how we respond is everything, really. And it seems like we're doing a pretty good job, as far as the oppression that we overcame, the voter suppression and stuff to make this happen. And yeah, I think we should all be inspired by the events and take it as an opportunity to reach across the aisle, because, like Hillary's deplorable comment is equally as bad as the John McCain comments or whatever. It's like that's an othering. Hillary Clinton actually has Mars, Saturn, Pluto, which is a triple conjunction, Mars, Saturn, Pluto. And that's the hawk, the war hawk and stuff. But, that tendency or that propensity to otherize, is, it's a strong unconscious dimension of who we are. And the more we can bring it to consciousness and recognize that there are many more similarities, there's much more of an underlying unity to who we are than there are divisions, the healthier our society and our psyches will be.
Yes. And I just can't imagine us going back. I just can't even see it. I just don't see it happening. I think we're going to move forward
Likewise.
one way or another. So I understand
Likewise.
that.
Yeah, and I think this is a helpful symbol for that. Sorry.
Yeah. So I understand that Daniel has a question for Chad.
I do. Chad, I admire your balanced approach tremendously. And I think it's what I admire about Joe Biden and what we all need to adopt. But the question that I have is, you touched on, and I've heard it before in the media, of Donald Trump somehow, reaching out towards 2024 and, getting back into the mainstream. And you said maybe clean up his act. How do you imagine that's possible once he no longer has the immunity of his office? I mean, how can that possibly happen?
Honestly, I don't really think it will happen. I'm trying to, and I do believe like anyone is capable of redemption. Like it doesn't seem likely in any way, but I don't know. I can't, like in the same way that like John Lewis was convinced of the beloved community and he was capable of loving his oppressors, the people who, were suppressing him. Like there's something in me that strives to maintain that perspective as well. And yeah, like we're all wounded, you know, and he to me, he's like a wounded child tyrant, you know, that's where it's, and so I don't know, I feel like there's at any time there's the potential for redemption, but it is definitely not likely. It is much more likely, actually, like we discussed last week, that he will, you know, face the law and may very well, I mean, he may actually end up in jail and not be able to run for president again. And if he continues to self-emulate and self-sabotaging decisions, he will look more and more farcical. Like to me, he's always looked farcical, but clearly he doesn't look that way to 68 million people. And so the more decisions he makes that are divorced from reality, the less detached from it he will appear. And I think the more that happens, the less numbers of people will follow him and the more the reality will come clear. But it's still a possibility for him at this moment to like not to reverse the fraud position, concede, and then go off onto Twitter land, buy AON, you know, and do his own media network adjacent from Fox. And he could get more people, you know, and it all depends. The QAnon thing is crazy. They have an apocalyptic vision that's not going to happen. So I don't know how much coherence it can maintain, because they're all expecting like this giant arrest and some huge thing happening, which isn't going to happen. So I don't know, but I'm just trying to.
I have two responses.
Please.
You know, one of the scenarios I see is Adam Schiff as Attorney General. Adam Schiff is going to go after him like you know, like nobody's business. Okay, and so is the Southern District of New York as soon as they have the ability to do it. You know, Samuel Hahnemann and Charles Manson both had very prominent Eruses in their chart. You know, there are three dimensions to a chart. You know, a natal chart has two dimensions. It's time and space. It has a third vector, a third you know, dimension that intersects it, you know, down through the center of the parallel, and that's the consciousness that's brought to it. So, you know, how can we expect his consciousness to come into all these, you know, revolutionary and you know, all the things that we're hoping for? I just don't see that happening. What I see in his chart and what I talked about last week was that his north node to me is he's on a path of self-undoing. I mean, that's what his life path really is, and I don't think he has any way out. But I just don't see him having any other path forward once he has no immunity. I mean, he's a goner. He's a goner.
Yeah,
and he knows that. And the problem is he's not going to sit around and wait, you know, for the law to catch up with him.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we also have to remember though that he is attempting to use the Supreme Court to press some thumbs on the scale here. So it's a conservative balance right now, and so we have to see how that goes. I do have a comment from Jen, and anyone who wants to take a stab at this. So what he wants, what Trump wants, and what the law allows are two different things. I think it's a slow realization, but the sooner he is out of the media, the better. The media are pushing. Who wants to comment?
Well, I'll make a little comment in that he is a showman. That his Leo, you know, Mars and Leo conjunct the ascendant. He does, you know, he loves putting on a show. And you know, I've thought, oh God, you know, is he scripting all of this and, you know, deciding how he wants this all to work out? But then there's also the the Neptune part of it that's come in, and you know, like Savannah Guthrie said to him, "You're the president. You're not somebody's crazy uncle." You know, and I think, but you know, then I had this vision of, oh my God, he is somebody's crazy uncle. You know, when he's up there, you know, spouting off. But you know, I think, you know, he does have the potential to, you know, possibly see God, whatever, you know, and you know, with the Neptune square the nodes, you know, square his luminaries and square his nodes. But will it happen? Who knows?
Probably not. I mean, the question was about his being in the media. Is that like, I mean, he's going to create his own media. That's the thing. He wants to be on center stage always. And that's the way he'll be able to do it, I think, is by buying AON. And, you know, I'm just guessing, but I think you're right. You know, that Adam Schiff may very well prosecute him, you know, and Israel put Ehud Olmert in prison for bribery or something. And we should be able to do that too. If we're a nation worth our salt, says we're, you know, a nation of laws.
They've got him
We
six
don't-
ways.
we don't
They've
put
got
our
him 6 ways to
presidents-
Sunday. He and the rest of his family. They've got him 6 ways to Sunday.
Right. At the same time, though, like, you don't necessarily want to like create more civil strife, like a, you know, and like, because it potentially could, like, if this deep state narrative is the way that, like, say, the Boogaloo Boys and the right-wing white nationalists rationalize that, then we would be more likely to have Oklahoma City bombings and that type of thing because of that ideation that sees the deep state government as being in control. So
First of all,
we need to support the rule of law.
I agree. I totally agree.
Did you see that they stopped talking about the media? They stopped his tweets today. Twitter stopped it.
Yes.
And everyone else, Melania's and Mike Pence's and the whole, they stopped all of them tweeting.
Only the tweets that were completely false. They allow the ones that are.
How can they decide though that doesn't seem very democratic? Do you know what I mean? It's like, is there a danger of the other side tipping into, you know what I mean? There's a mirror thing going on here. And I think there's a big danger of that. It's like, just a minute, when you start censoring like that and say, no, you're wrong, and so you're just going to stop you talking, that's dangerous in itself. And
It's true, but you can't.
It ignites everything.
That's true.
Yeah, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And if there are, like, the FBI they're concerned about the white extremists more than any other, you know, Antifa or anything like that. They're concerned about that. And they've actually been triangulating against the president of the United States because they realize he is a voice that inspires that violence. So it's not just Twitter. It has to do with social cohesion and not inciting violence.
Yeah, but I mean, it potentially could incite it by absolutely trying to suppress it like that. It's not possibly the way to go. It just looks to me like that's both sides are looking a bit iffy.
Yeah, I agree. It's a paradoxical situation, but I think, my opinion is, it's good in this moment that he cannot communicate violent actions to a lot of crazy people who are on edge.
Oh, if he was, telling them if he was inciting violence, sure.
And he was. I mean, he did in that speech. In the speech on TV, he said something about aggression.
Can I jump in?
Please.
I'm gotta say, yeah, he did incite violence. And what Michaela is saying, like, you're completely ignoring an entire element, which is privilege. So he sits in the most privileged position, I want to say, in the world, right? And so for him to be speaking from that position, like to
I'm not
say
condoning what he was saying. I'm condoning.
But
I'm saying
it
about
does sound
against
like you are, because you keep
dangerous
saying it.
no, no, no,
But
no, not at
he
all.
did incite violence.
Well, I didn't hear him say. I didn't hear him incite violence actually. And if they stopped his tweets, how do we know? So
They didn't stop his tweets. It's just when the tweet is so outlandish or full of falsehoods, they'll either flag it and say it's not correct, or if it's too much, they will pull it. But
they stopped all of them, is what I'm saying. They
I
stopped.
don't think so. I
Oh,
mean,
they
he's
did.
still
I
tweeting.
looked on there. They look.
Steve Bannon's account was permanently deleted because
Well,
he called for the
Steve Bannon, yeah, that's different.
But
Sure.
not everyone else was not permanently deleted. Their
Not
tweets were
permanently,
being
no.
blocked. No.
But I mean, they did stop all of them in one go.
I'm
which was
curious,
odd.
where do you live?
I'm in Bordeaux in France.
Yeah. I think that's from France.
America, I was a resident for 7 years.
It's true,
And I
but
have family there. And
We're
I was in
telling you what
Washington,
happened.
DC.
We're telling you what happened, but you're like not hearing us.
No, I'm
holds,
not hearing you.
Okay, now I'm gonna jump in now.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's odd to me. Like, I understand we're like a global community, but here we sit right here, like, and here I sit right here, and we've said it. I just had to jump in because I did hear you. But anyways, please.
No, I'm talking about censorship. I'm not talking about inciting
That's what
violence.
I'm talking about.
I'm talking about
So-
freedom of speech.
So I get what Michaela is trying to bring up. Any kind of censorship, should it happen, because you could be saying the truth or you could be telling a lie, but if you don't have the opportunity to speak it, then it's suppression. So
And my point is that you can't ignore privilege in that conversation.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you too, Della, for sure. He has incited violence. That's what he's doing. He tweets out his accolades to all of those who do kind of violent and disturbing things right now to fight for him. So it does seem as though he wants a civil war to arise on behalf of his name or something. And so yeah, there's something that we in America, we're really feeling it because we're so close and we're in it. But I also understand Michaela's point of view where, from France, it's and a lot of other countries. I have a lot of international friends, and they kind of think more objectively about the censorship too. So, but the problem is that we have a population in this country who listens to it, whereas maybe in other countries they might be a little more. I don't know.
The issue is the elephant in the room, in the fact that the media has been consolidated into a very narrow spectrum of expression. And Jeff Bezos wants to buy the CNN. He already owns the Washington Post. He already owns Amazon. A handful of people are controlling the messages that we are hearing, and this is the elephant in the room. And I think that that's what Michaela is alluding to.
Yeah, it is.
Sure, but the thing is like what Della was saying, is it's the privilege of being president. And then what he was saying was that the election, our democracy, was fraudulent, and the 80 million of his followers should believe that the vote that they just made wasn't legitimate and that Biden wasn't legitimately elected president. Now, if they can't delete that, if they can't censor that because of the threat that it poses to our society, because of 80 million people potentially believing a lie that they've been disenfranchised in our democracy, that's why they deleted it. And I am thankful they did.
Yeah. So I want to, hey, Mitchell, are you still here? Because I know that you want to just get something in there. He might be away from his computer. Are you there, Mitchell? Okay, let's go on.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. What were you going to add?
Oh, it was ages ago. I don't.
So you forgot, or the conversations.
Well,
moved
no,
on?
I mean, all I wanted to add to it is that I don't think Donald Trump is going to be around that much longer. And I think we overestimate the patience and the power of retainment. Also, Americans do not put their presidents in jail. When Ford pardoned Nixon, I hated Richard Nixon as much as anybody. He did the right thing. You don't want to turn Donald Trump into a martyr. You don't want people standing outside with signs saying, "Free Donald Trump, free Donald Trump." You want him to disappear and go away, and that will happen if you leave it alone. That's my feeling. Also, remember, he was born, if you like the birth time that we use, with Regulus on the ascendant. And that means that he was the kingmaker, and according to Babylonian astrology, if he misuses his power, which he certainly has done, he will crumble. And often they do wind up in jail or get assassinated. One more thing to add, of course, is that we all know about the 20-year cycle of assassinations and deaths of presidents. My prayers are for Joe Biden, that
Okay.
nothing happened to him, and that we don't stir this up more to incite more violence.
Well,
So I think Donald Trump disappears. I think he goes away.
I was going to say, though, that I just noticed, because Daniel was saying about on the inauguration, Biden's Jupiter exactly opposing, I mean, it's transiting Jupiter exactly opposing Biden's Pluto at 7 degrees.
Yeah, but I think Daniel's right. That's power.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that Uranus at 7 degrees Taurus and Mars conjuncted is going to be exactly T-squaring that.
Of course, and it's also going to be squaring. It's going to be squaring the Sun, Saturn, and Jupiter on Inauguration Day. It's the most explosive. No, I know it's the most explosive. Series. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So this is all. Yeah, it's all a very, very incendiary.
God help us all.
Yeah.
Well, Mitch, you said that Americans don't jail presidents, and that's true because we haven't done it. However, there has to be accountability. So,
well, there's accountability. He's been thrown out of office. That's accountability. Well, am I going to be the judge and jury? Of course not. I want him hung by, like Mussolini was, upside down from a lamppost. But I think that the accountability will be the fading of his memory. You guys remember Amadeus, the movie, the play Amadeus? How Salieri lives to be an old man, and he loses his mind because his music has faded into nothingness, while Mozart, who died at 37, his music is known everywhere. I don't know if you've seen the play or the movie, or it's been a long time, but that's, to a narcissist, which is what Donald Trump is, that's the worst thing that he can experience.
I don't think his memory's going to go away. I think that he's going to go down in history as the greatest traitor in American history.
Well, no, I agree with you, Daniel. I don't think his memory will go away. I think his power will go away. My feeling is that once he's really out of it, out of gone and everything else, these people, the QAnon people and all the rest of them, find somebody else, or they will find something else to spin off about.
Right.
They're not going to have Donald Trump as their poster boy anymore.
Right. He just formed what was out there. He didn't create it.
Also, remember, we all know that the worst thing that could happen, I think it was Paul Klugman in the Times, but a few of them are writing about it. The worst thing that could happen is that the next guy looks good in a suit, talks nice to women, treats blacks and Hispanics like they're human beings, and takes over the whole freaking thing. My brother always said, be glad that Donald Trump isn't smarter.
Exactly. If all he had to do is put MAGA mask and drop him out of planes in March,
that's right.
And he would have won.
That's right. Exactly. But his ego wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
Again, that's the 12th house Mars, not the first house Mars, as some people like the other ascendant. No question, in my opinion, but it's Mars in the 12th house. All about fear. And, you know, and that's why I said earlier that Donald Trump had a purpose here. His purpose was to stick us in the eye so that we would wake up and say, oh my God, it isn't what we thought it was. It's all an illusion. We have to change this.
Yeah.
Okay, can I
reflection
say
of doing
something? Hello.
Please.
Hello. Yes. Here's Trump's chart, and he's born with Regulus on the ascendant.
Right.
The king. The king has fallen. Let's look at Biden's chart. Regulus has now moved into Virgo. It's on his north node. I just discovered that yesterday. I thought, wow. So maybe he's
Well, that's an interesting point.
Hang on. Maybe he's the good king. Any such thing? And yes, Mitch, I'd be interested in what you have to say.
Well, you know, when we deal with astrology, first of all, there's an infinite number of planets, asteroids, fixed stars. We can make ourselves nuts, of course, just looking at one chart. It could take you 12 years. So each of us has to choose the path and the language that we use to define what we mean by it all. And you can find all kinds of different things in each of their charts, obviously, to draw your own conclusion. It's one of the problems with astrology. It's a little bit subjective. But if you just want to look at Regulus just for one moment, the difference between it being on the ascendant, you know, by solar arc direction, Donald Trump had Uranus on his Mars when he got elected. Now it's on his ascendant. And Bobby Kennedy was killed when solar arc directed Uranus was on his ascendant opposing his Mars. And I think that you know, again, there are many different ways you can look at all these things. We all have, it's great to hear other astrologers and what, you know, language they use and what things they use. But I think that the bottom line is that Donald Trump had a purpose. He had his 4 years. He had his 15 minutes of fame, so to speak. And it's over. And it's just a matter of cleaning up the mess. And like I said before, counting the silverware, which they're going to do as soon as they move into the White House to see what's missing. And I do think that he did what he had to do. He is gone. He is history. Look at how many books have been written about him already. There's going to be 1,000 books written about Donald Trump. Of course, his memory is not going away, Daniel. I agree with you. He's here in our consciousness, and there'll be jokes on Saturday Night Live and on every other show for decades about, oh, you're Donald Trump, or you're like, but what's the worst thing that you can do to a demagogue or a narcissist? Make fun of him. When Charlie Chaplin made The Great Dictator in 1940, he later said if he knew what had happened in the concentration camps, he never would have made the movie. But he made the movie making fun of Hitler, and it's a great movie, one of my favorites. Hitler banned every Charlie Chaplin movie from Germany until his death. And it hurt him so, he got him so angry. That little son of a bitch. And he made a movie about me, and there you go.
You know, Uranus can be a fall from grace, and it's conjunct his north node and his sun, this is his path of self-actualization.
I agree. I think he did all of this to himself. Right. Nobody pushed him into this. He could have been a gentleman. He could have changed, but he can't change. And that's what you and Chad were talking about before, back and forth.
Right.
I don't think Donald Trump has the capacity to change.
He doesn't want to. He could have done
it in the middle of this election. He could have turned around and said, oh, I'm so sorry for the poor people who died. Everyone said, oh, let's vote for him. He's a schmuck. He's a putz. He can't change. This is who he is, and he's not going to change. And a lot of the people who back him, they're looking for some anger. They are angry. I don't remember which of you people mentioned this before, but there are many people in this country who are angry and feel rejected, and they have no hero and nobody standing up for them. And so Donald Trump came along and said, I'll stand up. But they're not, he doesn't have the power anymore. So they're going to have to find somebody else. And again, my biggest fear is that the next one they find is going to be smarter.
Mitchell, I did a talk back in December of last year about 2020, and my opening remarks was mishas. Okay. So,
but it's true. That's exactly what we're in. We're in the middle of a, you know, Zaya Mishigas, as my grandmother would say.
Well,
I'll,
sorry, Linda.
I just want to say quickly that they're both very old, aren't they? Like, is there any limit on the age of a US president?
No,
No. Okay. Okay.
no, but there should not be, just to, again, I'm going to have to go in a few minutes because I've got to do something else, another video thing in about 40 minutes that I got to eat something or I'm going to pass out. But the Supreme Court should not be a lifetime, nor should the federal judges be a lifetime appointment. And there's somebody came up with a very clever idea that every certain number of years, certain Supreme Court justices should retire. So a president or every other president can appoint a certain number, because we are not the same country that we were. We're sitting by a river, as the Buddhists say. And the next day you go to that river, you're sitting by a different river. The water has moved. The animals have moved. The plants have changed. And so we are sitting by a different river now than we did in 2016. That's why Donald Trump is no longer valid for our country. But to have a Supreme Court justice, this woman Barrett, who they just pushed on, who did not know, could not answer the 5 things that the First Amendment guarantees us when she was being questioned. A Republican senator had to tell her the last 2. She goes, oh, yeah, that's right. Are you serious? You're the Supreme Court. You're on the Supreme Court. You cannot name the 5 things that the First Amendment guarantees us? And this woman is going to be a Supreme Court justice for the next 40 years? God help us all.
She's never ruled on a criminal case.
She's the most incompetent person, and I'm including, what's his name? My least favorite, one of them all, Clarence Thomas. She's the most, she's been a judge for 2.5 years or something. And they put her on the Supreme Court. So what we're worried about, you know, are legitimate things, and what we're all talking about are certainly legitimate. What worries me much more is the undercurrent. I don't want to call it the deep state because people don't even know what that means. That was a term that began under Grant, because Grant's administration was so corrupt that they decided they needed career people who would work in the government to keep the government going no matter who the president was. And that's when the quote unquote deep state began. And you know, but the undercurrent and the judiciary that Trump has changed more radically than any president in history, and moved the judges so far to the right, this is what scares me much more than who the president is. And now we're not going to see, the Supreme Court's not going to enter into this election. That's all nonsense. They have no reason to, and everybody's going to say, Donnie, you know, pack up your toys and go home. But the damage has been done. And Joe Biden can't expand the Supreme Court, not without the Senate behind him. And so, you know.
Yeah.
I just, my last word, I'm sorry, Stacie. I just want to refer everybody to a post that I put on Friends of Jeffrey Wolf Green last week from my friend Mark Rudd, who I went to high school with. He was actually a member of the Weather Underground.
I know Mark Rudd. My brother knew him very well, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, well, I grew up with him, and it's a lengthy post, but I want to point everybody towards it because he's got the vision of what we need to do to go forward.
Good. What's your website?
No, it's on Facebook. I put it on my website. It's not on my website. It's on Friends of Jeffrey Wolf Green on Facebook.
Okay, I'll look it up.
All right, beautiful. Well, we are, I think we're at the end of our session today. A lot of great views, a lot of perspective. I do want to mention that I think a lot of us are in alignment here, but there's also half of the country that is on a different path, and so it's going to be interesting. We'll see what happens. We do have the Supreme Court factor, which could impact the races that have not been called yet. So we will see how that goes. And Linda, when is our next time that we're getting together? Linda.
14th of December, isn't it?
Is it that far ahead? Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope.
Eclipse day.
Oh, shit.
That
There we
sucked
go.
it up.
That was-
There it is.
Hold on.
Oh,
Yes, so
yeah.
we're going to be getting together again. We thought we would know the race by now. We still don't.
Mm-mm.
Let's see if we know it on December the 14th.
We
at
might
11.
not.
We may not. So
And that's
11
the day it has to be certified, actually.
Oh
exactly.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
electoral.
We're gonna know in 2 days time.
Yes.
If
And
we
that
do it
is
tonight.
also an eclipse that day. That's the big eclipse. So
Yeah.
that should be the
Yeah. Well, and there is talk of Republicans designating electors that have not won the popular vote. That is a potential that I've heard discussed. So we will see what happens then. In the meantime, I want to thank everyone.
Thank you, Stacie.
Yeah, Mitchell
Thank you,
Lewis.
Stacie.
Thank you for all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. This is amazing. So Mitchell Lewis, Marty Dixon, Sue Hilliard, Daniel Fiverson, Michaela Villiers-Kendall, and Chad Alexander Harris. So thank you, everyone. Keep the
Thank
faith.
you
Let's
all.
do
It's
it.
great to see you all.
Thank you,
Absolutely. Yes.
everyone.
Take care.